You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another breakneck episode of Global Trade This Week, brought to you by our good friends at Cap Logistics. I'm Pete Mento, and with me, as always, is the erstwhile and damn sexy Doug Draper. Now, everyone, I'm going to warn you that I did not send anything ahead of time this week to Doug. And there's a reason for that. This has been a crazy week for me, Doug. This is our summer review cycle week. So we are going through our live reviews, live promotion boards. I'm also preparing for my boss's visit next week from Germany. And on top of all of that, I had another webinar today. It's been a crap slinging shit show for me today. So everybody, I want you to know that Doug has not had the opportunity to prepare for the complete non sequitur madness that is dealing with me. Normally he's had a chance to get ready for my crap, but not today.
Well, let's rip it. I mean,
so
the prep time can be anywhere from about 2 minutes to 2 hours with you, Pete. So sometimes it's good. So we'll see how we roll. I'm excited. Let's drop
You're welcome, buddy. Yeah, you're welcome. So since we flipped the coin, I love doing this to you. Since I flipped the coin, you won the toss. You have elected to receive. And therefore, you will be doing the first topic today, my friend. So what do you have for me?
I like it. Cool, man. I'm in. So this was something. So I've been on a lake vacation. I bet some of our listeners know exactly what I'm talking about. Big family. You fight over meals. Everybody gets on the lake to get away from each other. And you drink a lot of booze. So that's kind of my experience in the last week. So I'm back. But one thing that popped in my head was this topic. And I said, have we missed the golden era of the e-commerce? So basically, are we chasing a consumer profile that has already changed and morphed into something else? And my immediate take, Pete, was yes. And I'm like, kinda. And then I changed to, well, maybe. And I came up with 3 things that I think are indicators. We could say they are bellwether or not, but they're indicators that I noticed. Number one, warehouses have a stupid amount of inventory, excess inventory, as we have spoken about. And the big box retailers have a lot of those warehouses, and they have brick and mortar they got to support and still deal with, even though there's the e-commerce boom. So I think that there's going to be a lot of inventory pushed to a lot of brick and mortar and a lot of sales going on in the fall. We've spoken about that, but those sales are going to come with, you got to come to us. We're not going to you in the form of a delivery. You got to come to us. So I think that the big box guys have that advantage. The other piece is I just read last week that Amazon's canceling or delaying the opening of 16 different warehouses. They are a smart logistics company, and you have to take note of big steps that they make. So the fact that they're backing off a little bit, I think, is a sign. And then the other piece, which is kind of interesting that I wanted to throw in there, Pete, is that Just Eat Takeaway, Jet, which is a European-based a food delivery company, they actually bought Grubhub for like $7 billion a year ago. And they're now trying to potentially unload it, right? There's a lot of rigmarole and communication and crap about what they're trying to do. But the bottom line is they're not seeing the benefit of that. So initially I'm like, yep, people aren't going to e-commerce anymore. And then I'm like, well, kind of a little bit. And then I was in the maybe category. But I think there is going to be a shift. We talked about this before, Pete. This is my last comments is 2020 was kind of a WTF is going on in the world. People were just, crazy. 2021 was the purchase of goods. I've talked about goods and services that define the economy. So 2021 was goods. And we chased the consumer profile in 2021 because of supply chain issues. We couldn't get stuff over here. So now that it's landing and accessible and sellable, that's where this glutton of inventory is coming from. And then 2022 has been all about services, which is the flip of goods and services. So people are doing experience economy, traveling just like I did last week, and enjoying those level of experiences. So now that we're in this, I don't know, potential recession, inflation through the roof, what happens in a time of uncertainty? People pull back and they do what's familiar, not only with buying habits, but how they manage their life. And what is familiar is the way that we purchase and consume goods prior pandemic, which is going to a store and purchasing them. So my point is, I think the e-commerce wave is still growing, but not as fast. Consumer buying habits are definitely changing, and it'll be interesting to see. But the bottom line, it might take Pete, third and fourth quarter, going to be killer if you're a brick and mortar retailer to push goods and tangible items out your door for the holiday season.
Okay, you give you a lot to consider there.
I know. There you go.
Yeah. So here's where I'm going to start with this. I think that we have to take into consideration some things that people were not paying attention to when this inventory began to just pile up. First was a lot of these companies had a lot of cash. And having a lot of cash and being fluid allowed them to make some decisions that they normally wouldn't. I think a lot of people got sloppy. Our industry, the supply chain industry, is one that has always rewarded people who made frugal decisions, people who were cheap, but they were smart with their money, people who bought lean, people who were able to develop a supply chain strategy, develop a purchasing strategy that was smart. And when you've got a lot of money in the bank, you don't have to be as smart anymore. So when they saw that it was getting more and more difficult to get inventory into the country, they overbought because they felt comfortable. They're like, consumers are doing some really stupid things right now with their money. We have a lot of money. If ever there was a time to overcorrect, it's now. Let's do stupid things because odds are we're going to be in a situation where we can overcorrect one way or the other. And they did, but they missed the market. They overcalculated and they went the wrong direction. And now they have warehouses full of crap that people don't want to buy, even though they have the money to buy things. So now they're in a situation where they need to get the inventory people do want to buy. People who have money, have jobs, are still, according to, the consumer index, in a mood to buy. And we're with a supply chain on top of it that's still dysfunctional. So I think that if these brick and mortars want to sell things, they got to get them. And they've got to put them someplace to hold them in inventory. So they're going to have to go through a mass discounting, flooding of the market, ridiculous prices to sell things for pennies on the dollar before we can get there. That's going to be painful. It's going to be painful, and it's going to be a hell of a lesson to learn. And there's going to be a reward for people who remember the old ways, who remember the ways of the old grizzly bastards like you and I, who still find value in doing things the quote unquote right way, doing things that go back to what it was like before the golden age of e-com. Maybe the best lesson that we learned here is that we weren't as ready as we thought we were to convert as much as we did to this new brave world where e-commerce was as important as we thought it was. Maybe we've invested a little too much in the .com e-com world for so many things. Maybe we weren't quite so ready to have milkshakes and pints of ice cream delivered to our houses as we thought that we were. Maybe we weren't quite so ready to have 50-pound bags of dog food delivered for free in 3 days. Maybe there is a price to pay for that we didn't quite build into our revenue model. And maybe that lesson was learned the hard way.
Yeah. Did I just hear you say that drones are the end of drones because nobody wants 50-pound bag? Well, actually, they can't really carry more than about 1.5 pounds. So it'd be dog treats, I guess, as best. But Pete, I think we agree on this one. So
we do agree on this one, but I will never. I'm dying on the drone hill, pal. I'm dying on the drone hill. There's a market for drone deliveries, my friend.
All right. So here's the fishing pole. Let's go. Bring it in. What do you got?
All right. So number 2, for those of you who wake up every morning and look at your 401k portfolio, for those of you who are paid in stock options and look at your stock, most of us, it's been pretty painful when we take a look at that thing. But here's something that I take a look at all the time. I am going on my vacation at some point in September. And on top of that, I don't think I've discussed this. I'm getting married, Doug. I am getting married in the fall. Have I told you and Kian that? I believe I have.
No, I mean, I heard it from mutual friends across the country. But yeah, congratulations. That's a big one.
And I'm going on a honeymoon. I'll be in Italy for a very long time. So whenever I'm going on vacation to Europe in September, and then getting married, and then I'm taking the new Mrs. Trade Nerd to Italy for a very long extended honeymoon. And when you're going to go to a foreign country, what's one of the first things you take a look at? The foreign exchange rate. Now, I've spent a considerable amount of time in Europe in my 51 years roaming the planet. And one of the things I could always count on was when I got to Europe, just getting shellacked. You're just getting dunked on by the exchange rate. I'm old enough to remember when I would go to Great Britain, when I would buy a pint of beer, it was like, $2 to the pound, just getting hammered on that exchange rate. I mean, but you stop thinking about it, you just stop thinking about it and you enjoy it. And then when you come home, you realize you just got fleeced by the pound. And then the euro, it was relatively similar, it was like $1.50 to the euro. And you just try not to think about it. And then you come home, and between that and that, you're like broke for a month. Well, good news, everybody.
Yeah.
The euro sucks right now. Like it's almost at parity. I think it's 1.18. Like it's a dollar and it's $1.02 or something. Like it's almost at parity. So when I go to England and France and Germany and Austria in a couple of weeks, to get my drunk on, and Amy decides that she's going to go spend half of my salary on Louis Vuitton bags. It's going to be like I'm doing it in New York, only with 17% national tax on top of it. So what's going on? Well, what's going on is that the European economy is getting absolutely battered by what's happening in Ukraine, that their energy prices are killing that economy. There's really no nice way to put it. It's killing that economy. And they are now feeling the after effects of what has been going on with COVID, what's been going on with the global supply chain, and what is just that lingering effect of all of these different decisions that were made, with everything from quantitative easing to dumping money into the economy, to the long-term effects of the recession and inflation. So, Doug, what you're seeing now is the rest of the world's economies hampering their currencies. So for those of you heading off to Europe for your vacations, good for you. Hopefully your flight makes it there in social luggage, 50-50. Second of all, enjoy it while you're there. You're going to see these currency issues lingering for quite some time.
Yeah. I agree 100%. And I noticed that when I was coming back. Wisconsin is not out of the country, but it depends on the part of Wisconsin. It could potentially feel like another country. And I noticed that it almost in parity, and it hasn't made that much national news. Maybe it's not as sexy as a story, but it's phenomenal for the services aspect of the goods and services that I've mentioned before. The thing that I would say is, what's it going to look like in September? And the one thing that just popped up is that it's pretty damn cold in a lot of Europe, and a lot of that fuel and natural gas is coming and impacted by the war over there. And I don't know if that's going to help or hinder, but I don't think it's going to help a whole hell of a lot. So I think that parity of exchange rate will be with us for a while, at least long enough for you to enjoy the benefits when you head over there in September.
Wait till my second topic. And second of all, buddy, when the US dollar and the pound and the euro are all basically the same, it means that our exports are all competing pretty much at that same currency level. which means that it's going to be just as easy to buy that American high-end tech export as it is that German one or that French one or that Japanese one, which means that American workers are going to have a pretty good competitive edge if the technology is better. And frankly, these days it is. So you're going to see some advantages for us from an export perspective on things like aerospace, medical technology, high-end computer science. We've actually got a chance to make up some ground. And I'm hoping that that's exactly what we do.
Yeah.
That brings us to halftime. So, what do you got, my friend?
Well, it's a big topic that made a lot of splash in the last 24 to 48 hours, and I'm just going to call it the Jimmy Webb rage. And it's not a new basketball player at the rookie league in Vegas for the NBA. It's the James Webb Telescope that has, just saturated the market. And the pictures that are coming out of that, Pete, are absolutely amazing. And I think a couple of things on this. One, technology around bringing those pictures, which is like orbiting the James Webb satellite is orbiting like 1 million miles away around the sun, and it detects objects like 100 times more faint or fainter than the Hubble. And I guess it detects infrared light, which enables it to look deeper into space, which is deeper back into time. And at the end of the day, Pete, I think it's awesome because I think I have a new desktop background saver on my computer. The statistics and the things that we're saying and the mind-boggling scope and perspective of what this telescope is bringing to the table is just not tangible enough, at least for my simple mind from Kansas, to wrap my head around. And, if it's going back in time and looking at billions of years, I just want to go back in time enough that I can buy Apple or Amazon right at its infancy so I can crush it in the market, and then I would have sold it. So I think it's great. I love the pictures. I get the concept, but this is going to have a pretty short news cycle as far as what it is. But pictures are kick-ass. I love them. They don't even look real. But I think the Jimmy Webb is pretty cool, and we won't hear about it much again in about 72 hours.
You're wrong.
All right.
There are moments in humanity that define us. They define us as an animal, and this is one of them. And where we are seeing the very edges of our ability as mankind to touch the extremes of our ability to understand the universe around us, Doug. We are literally using the frontiers of our understanding of science to determine where we come from, how we came to be, and the nature of our existence. And I understand that maybe at Kansas, they don't spend a lot of time looking into that. But for those of us that went to schools that are worth more than the paper the degree was actually printed on.
Oh, all right.
We spend time focusing on these very interesting questions. So you go back to watching basketball, people at places like MIT and Harvard will worry about those big questions. Mm-hmm. As we spend more time considering whether or not we all just live in one giant simulation.
I don't know.
You just got to take a look into the very beginnings of the universe, and that doesn't. You and I to sit down on some big pretty hill someplace out in Colorado and just start doing fistfuls of mushrooms and start thinking about these big questions, because you are a brilliant man, and I don't think you just had a little time to think about these big questions, my man. Like this is a beautiful big question.
Yeah. Well, whenever there'll be a new marijuana strand that will be developed here in Colorado, and it will be called the Jimmy Webb. I guarantee it. And when that happens, I'll let you know. Then we'll go to the mountaintop and have that conversation. So,
all right. I'm willing to bet someone's already met it, pal.
Yes.
That sounds like, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. So mine is a lot less interesting than yours. So it is the middle of July. And my thoughts turn to equally as important issues as, astronomy, and that would be fantasy football. So, I think it's fascinating that at this time of year, all of the guys that got wedgies in high school for playing Dungeons and Dragons become the masters of sports, as they spend all of their time preparing for their fantasy football leagues. I am the commissioner of one league. I play in two other ones, Doug. But this one league in particular, which is made up mostly of guys I played rugby with, and then people that I worked at freight forwarders with. Three different freight forwarders: C.H. Robinson, Expeditors, and Crane Worldwide. And it is 12 different people in this league. It is the only league I'm in where there is no money involved, and all we do is talk trash. And we are awful to one another. Like I can't even begin to tell you how terrible we are to one another in this league. It is very much like the television show. This, like the way that we treat one another could easily be a 30-minute long format Netflix show. It is absolutely horrible. I found a dray carrier for a Friday night in the midst of the worst part of the COVID crisis, and I actually told the person I got it for that I demanded a second round pick in order for me to make this happen for him. Like it was absolute. We're awful to one another. So I cannot wait. I cannot wait for fantasy football season. I won last year's league, and I talked so much trash about it. It was absolutely brutal. Doug, I'm wondering, do you bother with the fantasy sports? I've got a feeling that's a no. I mean, right off the bat, I'm seeing it in your face that you don't have time for this stupidity. And
No.
since I'm guessing it's a no.
The answer is no.
Okay. The answer is no. So you don't even bother with the fantasy football, and because of that, I'm guessing that you don't have a first round pick that you're hoping to go after this year.
None of the above. Not interested. Don't care. The whole bit. That doesn't mean it's not important to other people. And based on the picture on over your left shoulder with some animal shooting a laser at something up there. I get it. Some people are into it. I'm not.
These are our concert posters from the great Sturgill Simpson. And this is two concerts from Washington D.C. that did not happen during the pandemic. These are highly collectible. So I'm a big Sturgill fan. See, Doug, I love when people say I love fantasy football because it makes me excited about all the games. I'm like, if you want to be excited about all the games, put like $500 on a 5-game parlay. And then like you'll suddenly care about the Bengals, against the Texans on the Thursday night game where there's a 7-point spread. And like you really want to care about football. So that was like my second question, Doug, is do you ever bet on sports? And I'm guessing that's also a big hard no.
Nope. I do not bet on sports. The only comment I have on sports betting, and it's not relative anymore because the Monday night football game is not as big. It's more Sunday night now. But I heard a statistic a while back that the game that is bet on the most week in and week out is the final football game of the week, because you got to make your money back, or you made your money and you want to really go for the big hit, and that's where all the desperation starts to chase into the betting. So no. Other than that point of information, I don't bet on sports.
Well, that's going to wrap it up on more of Doug's incredibly boring Wonder Bread, grape jelly, and Skippy peanut butter with a glass of white milk, middle of the country answers for halftime, brought to you by Cap Logistics here at Global Trade this week. And with that, Doug, why don't you give us your second topic?
I love it. Yes. So second topic, we talked about it a little bit, and this one's just super quick. Shocker, there's still congestion at the ports, and the media has decided to pick it up in the last couple of weeks, where they say there's a quantifiable measure that we've seemed to see out there, which people, the layman, the muggles of the world can really get around is number of vessels that are off the coast. And that number is increasing, which is obvious. You and I talked about that. You specifically talked about that multiple times. That it's not over. It's still coming. The interesting piece on this one is, number one, 65% of the vessels that are out there that are waiting are now in Gulf ports and East Coast ports, which again makes complete sense because when things were congested in the heat of the pandemic, people were going around the other part of the country and hitting these secondary ports that we spoke about. So they're all congested. LA is still congested. And we're not done with this thing yet. The one piece I want to call out, Pete, which simply just, if you follow the flow of goods through the supply chain, it is absolutely so evident. It's unbelievable. Here's what's going to happen next. Real estate, warehousing is going to be astronomically expensive in these second and third tier cities, which is where all these vessels are coming into and backed up on the ports on the Gulf Coast and the East Coast. So if you're a freight forwarder or a warehouse provider in Savannah, Georgia, and South Carolina, you're going to crush it as far as the ability to make a lot of money. And if you're an importer and have decided to use some of those ports, you better strap your boots on because there ain't going to be any capacity, and it's going to perpetuate the things that we just spoke about on my first topic. So, shocker, we're not done. There's congestion. It's now all over the entire country, and warehousing is the next supply chain node connector that we've spoken about that's really going to get hit.
Yeah, I think all the connectors on the East Coast, it's going to be just compiling. It's going to be one after another of a year. It's going to be backed up frustration. So you have that fear of a West Coast port strike. And, right now there's pictures I saw just an hour ago of this trucker issue out in Oakland, where you got people blocking the port. And, whatever happens out there is whatever's going to happen. And Peter Churchwell had that great tweet this morning where he said, you got this interesting conflicting information coming out of the negotiation where you have some people saying there's definitely going to be a resolution. It's just going to take longer than was expected. And that resolution is going to end in what will probably be a sizable increase to pay and what will be a bit of a losing hand to the owners, who are going to end up getting less automation than they wanted, but some automation. And then other people that are telling the press that port workers aren't happy and they're nowhere near a conclusion. And this is going to go way past August. And that type of instability, lack of information, that drives people to keep using the East Coast, which is what you just said. So I can tell you from my own personal being in that market, all I hear is, so, hey, how about those East Coast rates? And can you tell me about capacity of the East Coast? And if I can't get into Savannah, what's Charleston seem like? And talk to me about Jacksonville and what's going on in New York anyway. And, talk to me about containers. And, it's getting bad, but now it's starting to get to that. Okay, I need to find warehouse space. Talk to me about the rail. What can you do for me with regards to chassis? Is there anything at all about more drivers, Pete? Like what? Something's got to give. Something's got to give. And for most of our career, it was West Coast, West Coast, West Coast, West Coast, West Coast. And you got people now who are like rolling the dice, Doug. Where they're like, oh man, I don't want to do it, but it's peak. Those rates are pretty sweet on the West Coast. And then they go to their boss's office and they're like, what do you say? He's like, well, what I'm saying is give it a shot. But if this thing even goes a little bit sideways, it's your job. You're never working in this business again because you're the one who convinced me to do it. And in a time when for the past 2 years, we dealt with one monkey circus after another, right? Why not? At this point, why not? People are they're taking a chance at it because it's like you keep saying, these connectors, one after another, it's just back. It's almost like a virus. It's ruining the next thing that it touches, going all the way back into it. And I'm running out of things to tell people to try next.
Yeah. All right, bring us home, my man. What you got? Topic 2.
Sorry, that was my long-winded way of saying I agree with you, Doug. So the last thing I'm going to bring up today is, this is a pretty dire thing for us to talk about last today. So there was a fire. It's been talked about. It was talked about pretty extensively in the media. Some of the largest LNG export points out of North America down in Texas. And the fire that happened in the LNG port has made it very difficult for American exports of liquefied natural gas, the propanes of the world. Why is that important? The Nord Stream pipeline between Europe and Russia is currently down. So today is the 13th of July. It's currently down for maintenance. There's some questions about how long it's going to be down and the maintenance associated with it. There's 2 things that you should keep in mind. The first is it being down for maintenance could have been permanent. So it could have been that it being down for maintenance could have been permanent. But the Canadians decided to send back a very important component. It was a gas turbine that had been sent to Canada for repair. Now, it wasn't supposed to be sent back because that would have been a violation of the export protocol. But there are very specific loopholes that could have been used to send this back to Russia. So they did. There are also ways to look at the sanction to say that it could not have been sent back. But the Canadian export enforcement regulators decided they would send it back. A lot of this having to do with a financial windfall and also, I think, some fear. I really do. So this one very large component was sent back, allowing Nord Stream to actually continue to be functional. If it had not have been sent back, there wouldn't have been any question about whether or not Russia would have been able to actually continue to send natural gas into most of Western Europe. It would not have functioned. We would have had Russia on the ropes. That would have been the end of it. But they sent it back. Now, if Russia decides to turn off the gas to Germany, or if Germany decides to no longer buy gas, it's game over. Right now, Germany is experiencing some of the highest costs of energy that it has seen in its modern era since the creation of the European Union. There are parts of the country that are experiencing brownouts. There are parts of the country that are being told they'll be rolling blackouts. They're being told that they may have to ration energy. The economy itself is suffering. For the first time since the 1990s, so you're talking since the wall went down, they're actually feeling recessionary hits. Their export economy is suffering. At exports, I mean, they're actually going to have trade imbalances. That doesn't happen to Germany. The European economy is going in they need to buy energy. And natural gas hasn't been exported out of America because of this terminal problem at the rate that would necessitate growth. They're going to buy natural gas from everywhere, including the United States. Natural gas has been expensive in America, but not as expensive as it could have been if we could have been exporting it at pace, which is going to start as soon as that terminal opens up again. And when it does, the cost of natural gas in America is going to go through the roof. When does that happen? Late August. So in early September, when fall starts, the cost of natural gas in this country is going to go through the roof. And it will continue to, because we're not exploring more and we can't pull out enough to deal with our own needs. But gas companies are going to export it wherever they have to make as much money as possible on it, because that's what you do. Mm-hmm. You sell your goods wherever the market's going to get you the most money. The world is looking at the most expensive winter that it's seen in a very, very long time, including us.
Yeah. Well, that dovetails.
Now,
well, yeah, go.
The last thing I want to say about this is that's going to make producing goods more expensive in Europe because they rely on natural gas for much of their production costs. They rely on natural gas to move things around Europe with LNG, dollies, LNG, trucks, LNG, you name it. It's going to make production of goods more expensive, which is going to make their goods more expensive, which is only going to make the recession deeper. It's going to make keeping buildings and warehouses in this country more expensive as well to heat. Doug, we have just made the recession worse. We have also made inflation worse, and we're doing it to ourselves. Over to you, pal.
Yeah, that is pretty deep. I'm not sure if you just wrote the script for the next Mission Impossible movie or not, but the first half of that sure sounded like it. And yeah, I think the bottom line is, one thing that caught my attention on that one, Pete, is it's going to go to the highest bidder, right? And if people are willing to pay in Europe, and we need it here in the U.S., and it's going to go off of our shores, and we're going to wave goodbye, so be it. That's just how life and business works. And so, yeah, it's going to go offshore. It's going to make our situation more expensive. And all this is going to transpire right when we need heat, and the fall and the winter starts to come into play. So, yeah, excellent detail, great story. You're a storyteller, all of it valid, and it makes complete sense, Pete.
Yep. Buy sweaters, folks.
buy sweaters. That's often what Cap Logistics says when Keenan's about ready to push the button and say the time of the show is now over. So unfortunately, before we get pulled, I'm going to have to wrap it up and thank Cap Logistics for, as I say, pushing the buttons and turning the levers, because you and I wouldn't be here without those guys. So thank you, Cap Logistics. And thanks to our listeners. I think that was a hell of a way to kick off or end the show. And hopefully our audience found it to be very enjoyable and all of our topics exciting and relevant as we continue to analyze, engage, and try to figure out this crazy thing that we're in called supply chain and logistics. So until next time, Pete, thanks for joining me, my man. Always fun to talk to you. And, I think we should have a weekly update on Mrs. Mento, kind of how the wedding planning's going. I think our audience would really appreciate that. So just keep that in mind as you prep for next week's meeting.
Very expensively. That's how it's done.
Okay. All right. And thanks for joining us today, Global Trade This Week. Pete, we're out of here, my man. We'll catch you next week.